Welcome to Impact. I'm Philip Morris, CEO of Proctors. Delighted to have with us today Susan Davis, who's the principal architect of SD Atelier out of Saratoga Springs. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did. You said it absolutely
now,
right.
Atelier means?
It's a word that means studio in French. It also means it in German. It also stands for design workshop. The reason being, I had worked in Switzerland for a period of time, about a year actually, at a small atelier d'architecture over there. Came back, met up with my husband who had worked in Germany, and we decided to form a business together. The SD can stand for Susan Davis or Sue and Don. and the atelier has to do with really that type of design workshop that is a firm concerned about design, not just technical types of architecture.
So just to briefly tell our audience and me, what's the nature, just a little quick look at your portfolio of what you do.
So our portfolio, we're known to do high-end custom residential work. We've been involved with the Preservation Foundation in Saratoga Springs, so we've also been involved with a lot of historic renovation type of projects. We're currently involved with the Adirondack Architectural Heritage Group, and we're working with them on a renovation of a stone mill up north in the Adirondacks. So our portfolio includes projects in and around Saratoga Springs, up north in the Adirondacks. We've also been involved with some veterinarian type projects. We completed the Burnt Hills veterinarian project about 10 years ago.
Well, was there a reason you end up specializing in
I think because we enjoy animals. We think that there's a need for that type of work. Veterinarian hospitals were expanding, even in a lower economy. People were still taking care of their pets, so there was the need for that. A lot of veterinarian organizations restructuring, and it's a caring type of profession. So we wanted to be a part of that.
Right, so what was the moment when you went, oh, I like this idea of building something, of designing something?
I think this is going to sound silly, but as a young child in elementary school, I was always very fascinated by people's homes and the layout of homes, and actually used to play around with drawing floor plans and deciding that if I could influence how a space is laid out, which influences a person, that would be a pretty interesting thing to do. I wasn't brought up necessarily around a lot of architects. My dad was an engineer. They worked through building their own house. I got to see how that went through. And I always enjoyed art. I liked the opportunity to be doing creative projects. I think sometimes guidance counselors tend to think architecture is more about a combination of math and science, and I always want to say it's creative problem solving. It's not just taking a test or writing a paper, it's really getting hands-on with projects. And I always
did you
really
know, like
that.
when you were in high school, going to college,
I knew in high school I was interested in it. I went and looked at some architectural schools. I talked to an architect and decided, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it because it's dealing with people, it's influencing, it's creative design, which I like. And I was a decent math student, so I felt that it was a good combination of the two, between art and math, not just strictly
art and science.
Exactly, not just straight sort of an engineering type of path, which is a little bit more technically oriented. It does have that creative, artistic element to it.
So what was your favorite project in your career so far?
Favorite project? I am really most proud of a couple of homes that we've designed, because I think that they've used the materials in them quite sensitively. They blend in with the environment. I really go along with that philosophy of making a building interact with the site, and there's a couple homes that we've done that I feel have been successful and really done that. I'm also very proud of a theater building that we did up in Scroon Lake for a non-for-profit group. Post and beam timber frame, where they do rehearsals for their main shows. And it's a nice project because it was a project that the builder really took pride in, and he actually built it the way we really wanted to see it done, without minimal changes, and everybody was very pleased with it when it was all complete.
So what's a good client?
A good client. We like to get paid.
Oh,
we
right.
Appreciate that. I also think a good client comes to the table with their own ideas, with a willingness to let us have some creative input into it. Very good communication. There's got to be a good responsiveness going back and forth. like sometimes the clients that are the most involved tend to be the best clients because they really are engaged in the process. Because it is a profession that you really get to know people quite well, and you want to have that direct contact with them. So we always explain, this is what we expect from a client, this is what you can expect from us. That there's good communication, that we understand the end goals, that you have a reasonable budget to contend with. We try to be respectful of that, but we want to be realistic with what things cost. And we ask for timely courtesy.
I was on the board of the Darwin Mountain House in Buffalo, the Frank Lloyd Wright Prairie Home that was totally restored, beautifully done. And certainly Frank Lloyd Wright had his own reputation. But one of the interesting things is that project, between the communication between Darwin Martin and Frank Lloyd Wright, is the most documented client relationship he had with anybody. Thousands of communications, letters, handwritten notes, all notes from phone calls. And so it's very interesting to see how they client, architect, debate, challenge. No, my wife said no. I mean, it's just very interesting.
It is. I mean, we communicate through email. With today's technology, we can deal with clients that are even long way away. The most bizarre relationship I ever had was a client who was a CIA agent out of Texas who I never met, and his wife was in Washington, and we did everything through email contact. And but that is usually quite unusual. Usually,
that's so funny.
I always end up really strongly engaged with our clients, and at the end, we end up almost friends. Really, it turns.
So your favorite project, the thing you noted, was materials. Talk about that. People don't think about materials often because they go, well, it's stone or timber and drywall, right?
Right. They don't. What they have to understand is that the materials are going to impact how a space might feel. It's going to impact how it blends into the environment. If you're doing, we tend to work with a lot with natural materials. I tend to be a real person. I like to use real materials. There's a place for perhaps artificial type materials, but if we can, we strive to do real stone, real cedar shakes if we can, traditional type materials that will ultimately stand the test of time. I mean, having worked in Europe, they design and they build for permanence. They don't design and build like fast food architecture, where it's going to be gone in 30 years. They really want to put the money in to invest and make it last. So as much as we can afford to within people's budget, we not only start with the exterior materials, we get into the building science, the type of insulation, the type of windows, the products that are really going to add value for the cost.
So what happens to your head when you drive to Clifton Park or Wolf Road?
Well, I see there where there's been a loss of vision. Perhaps those communities were not planned. They evolved. They evolved by developers, by nobody having a clear master plan of this is the end goal, this is how we can lay it out, we can make it pedestrian friendly, we can make it biker friendly. It was just all about the dollars and building strip plazas, and there's a mishmash. And it's unfortunate because I think some of those communities now have not thrived as well as the ones that really started with a core downtown. I think Clifton Park is now taking steps, and it's positive to see, where they're trying to bring in more of a pedestrian aspect, more of a user-friendly aspect. I'm familiar with a colleague of mine who pretty much worked with the town trying to, for his senior project, beg them to start thinking about where is our downtown. And the problem with these communities is they don't have a central core. And the central core is where it starts. Good planning starts with a very vibrant downtown and should work out from there. And this whole separation of where people live to where they work, and therefore the automobile, and it's brought up in a book that Jim Kunstler wrote, The Geography of Nowhere. It has an impact on how people use their community and how they migrate around. So I kind of cringe when I see some of these communities, but it's encouraging to see that there is a movement towards making communities, especially with the price of gas, less dependent on the automobile.
But what happened? I mean, what was it? Simply the impact of the automobile? Why in America did we not hear? What's her name wrote that fabulous book in 1960, right? The Death of American City.
Yeah.
And it sort of says guys, this is what it takes.
I mean, I think it takes correct planning and zoning and people to realize that we need a good, healthy combination of both livability, affordability in a downtown area, and you don't need to separate where people live to where they work. I mean, initially people had the mom and pop store, and then they lived above it and they ran their store, and they didn't necessarily buy the house in the suburbs and then commute to work. And I think that there's now an impetus to be more urban. People want to be more centrally located to things and not have that separation. And I'm not sure if that was that people are just not aware. People are just not educated enough to know that correct planning can really impact the ultimate development of a community. I live in Saratoga. We're lucky that even though during the 70s that went through a slowdown economically with somewhat vacant buildings, that there was a grassroots movement to bring it back. And I think we're seeing the results of that because it does have a healthy downtown and a healthy mix of development too. And that development, unfortunately, is not always controlled by architects and town planners. It's sometimes controlled by outside developers.
Mm-hmm.
And the European model is such that they were traditionally steeped in having a core downtown, and then moving out from there, they're forced with their land to have to be very efficient with how they use it.
Yeah, so part of it for America is just huge amounts of land.
Huge amounts of land, and no oversight as to really how it's getting developed, or no kind of grand scheme of how to move forward and make sure it's being developed in the correct way.
Now, I have this odd observation, I'd love for you to challenge or test or react to, that we're in a unique place in this region. 4 counties, 4 cities, more than 4 cities, but 4 basic cities. The suburbs in the middle, and we're surrounded by these 4 cities, and rural life is a walk outside those 4 cities, and obviously traditional suburban life is a walk inside those 4 cities. Does that seem rational? I mean, we might be able to contain the suburban growth in this region?
I think so. I think there has to be a conscious effort on the part of those people in charge that have the power, whether it's municipal governments or just general people that have an interest, to see that maybe there's a connection that can be made to those communities. There is sort of movement towards bike paths, and there's other ways to use transportation, the connection of CDTA buses, or if there was trains that connected it, that might help try to make the connection. Certainly the balance of keeping rural where it needs to be rural for farmers is really crucial, but having the healthy economic mix, I think, between a connection of the communities would be a great thing. I can remember when we lived in Schenectady and I needed to go to Saratoga, and there was no easy way to get there. And I always thought, geez, if there was a train, I could just hop on a train and get there, and I would commute, save on gas, get something done in the 30 minutes on the train. It would make life a little bit more, community-wise connected. So
what would you imagine? Obviously, you're a young woman. You have a lot of career left. What would be like a wonderful thing to do that you would love to get your teeth into?
That's a tough question. I would love. I'm involved with education to some degree now. I would love to be involved with really influencing and having an impact as to how, for the future generation, they can make an impact with what they're developing and what they're learning in their curriculum to be able to plan things. I think long term that would have more of an impact. Obviously, I love what I do in terms of designing and creating, so the opportunity to be involved with perhaps a larger scale project that might have more of an impact, either for a municipality, would have, for me, a little bit more significance. I love designing homes, but I always like to help out where it seems to have more of a difference. And the idea of just designing homes for the well-to-do is really not always, the most fulfilling thing. I like to think that I can have an impact beyond that. So.
And have you seen an opportunity in the capital region? Something you kind of go, wow, that needs what I can do.
I'm still always looking for opportunities. I've certainly gotten involved in the educational component where I feel I could serve a purpose, either through the St. Rose Summer Academy teaching a class for youth and getting them to think about sustainable communities, and also through educational programs, through the STEM technology programs being offered, enrichment programs outside of the school as well. So that I feel like is a worthwhile endeavor. It gets me out of the office, and it also, if I have the ability to influence people that are the younger generation coming up and exposing them to what good town planning is, what good architecture is, what makes a community a healthy community, I think long-term that will come back as a fulfilling requirement.
Oh, absolutely. Well, that's fabulous.
So at any rate, that and always keeping my eye on interesting types of buildings. The most sustainable building is a building that's already built. So a lot of times we're involved with renovations and historic, rebuilding, if you will, of an existing structure. So I always love to be involved with that type of project too. I think I have a penchant for old buildings, and I love any opportunity to try to restore the old that can bring it back and maybe have an impact on a community that may be kind of struggling economically and so forth.
Well, so often these renovations become the heart of renewed community pride, activity. The civics of preservation is so positive. It's incredible.
And I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand in Saratoga. I know it can happen. It's happened in other municipalities.
Yep.
And one of the reasons we're so excited about the Stone Mill is we hope that will be a revitalization for Keysville, but nonetheless we're also talking to other preservation type groups, and we're hoping that we can be involved with them and work on projects that become a catalyst for the community.
Well, Susan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for
it was
what
very
you do
nice
and
to
for your impact on our community.
Thank you.
And this was Susan Davis from ST Atelier Architects in Saratoga. Thank you for joining us at Impact. I'm Philip Morris. Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.